Hi guys, in the recordings that follows, we'll be talking about English literature in detail. And these slides, these recordings and sessions which we are going to talk about English literature in detail will be mainly helpful for you in clearing your net exams. Let's not complicate the concepts. We'll see it in a very easy and light-hearted manner. Though the concepts will be very important for you and very useful for you in clearing your net exams. Let's go into the slides, and first we'll start with history of English literature. I'll give you capsules of information about history of English literature, which will be helpful for you during your net exams. So, if we have to talk about English literature, we have to talk about these Anglo-Saxon people. So, who were these Anglo-Saxon people? They were living in Old Britain, which is now called as Great Britain. So, these tribes were living in Old Britain area. And they were just tribal people, and they were from this community called Rovers, Vikings, Jutes, Normans, Anglos, and Saxons. So, as tribes, what they were doing, they were just waging wars with each other, and most of their tribal history marks wars between each other. And this age of Anglo-Saxon was between 450 to 1340, and the end of their era was 1066. The most important war which they waged during this session was the War of Hastings. So when they were only tribes, these tribal people, they had this habit of migrating from one place to another place. So a group of tribes called Normans, they came into England during the time of 1066. In England already they were Anglo-Saxons. So these Norman people, they come and they conquer England, and they just get into that place. And when they come into this place, a lot of changes happen, and these Anglo-Saxons and Normans together, they form a new race called Anglo-Normans. So what is the difference between these Anglo-Saxons and Normans? Anglo-Saxons, these people, they spoke the oldest form of English, that is Old English, and their Old English was heavily influenced by Latin language. While these Normans, they spoke a language which was like heavily influenced by French. So these people, like we think these Normans spoke French language, and therefore after the advent of these Normans into this Anglo-Saxons period of England, like the Anglo-Norman period, during the Anglo-Norman period, the language was heavily influenced by French rather than Latin. And this era is from 1066 to 1340. So at first, let's see the literature of these Anglo-Saxon people. Anglo-Saxon literature was kind of medieval writings, and they were writing a lot about God, demons, evils, goods, and fairy tales. And they were also writing a lot about their faith, and they had a lot of epics in their literature. And though they have written a lot in their literature, we don't have any authentic writers from this era. And these Anglo-Saxons, they were writing a lot of couplets, and these couplets were in decasyllabic forms, and they were using styles of iambic pentameter and octosyllabic forms. So one of the earliest styles which were used by these Anglo-Saxons were octosyllabic and iambic pentameter, and they were writing in decasyllabic couplets. So what are couplets? They are two-line poems, right? So they were writing couplets. And Anglo-Saxon language was certainly, it was not English. Okay, have that in mind. Anglo-Saxon language was not English, it was just a dialect which was spoken by these tribal people. And after the Normans came, after the War of Hastings, which we call as the Battle of Hastings, these Normans came, and they were like into these Anglo-Saxons' life, right? So most of their language, it was influenced by French thereafter. So the Anglo-Norman period was having a language which was influenced by French language. And then during this time comes a writer called Chaucer. So he was writing in styles which was heavily influenced by both these Anglo-Saxons and Normans. So it was between this period of Anglo-Saxons and Normans. So obviously his styles were like influenced by both these people. And at first, before writing in English, he started writing in French language and Latin language first. And after a meantime, he's getting an intuition to develop his own language from this people, and he starts to develop a language, unique language called English. So Chaucer develops his language, and that language is now called English. From these Anglo-Saxons and Anglo-Normans language, he is like developing a language, and that is called English. And Chaucer, he was at first writing in both French and Latin during the era, and later on he starts writing in his own language called English. So let us now look into the writings from Anglo-Saxon period and Anglo-Norman period before we jump into Chaucer's writings. Let us first look into Beowulf. It is one of the most important poem from Anglo-Saxon period, and it is one of the longest poem which is surviving even now from that period. So it had 3182 lines, and these lines were written in alliteration, and it was kind of an epic poem. So it was an old English epic poem, and the author is unknown, but still we call him as Beowulf poet or Anglo-Saxon poet, and it was written in a dialect. So these Anglo-Saxon people, they didn't have a language, they were only writing in dialects, they were only writing in tribal dialects. I've already said you that. So the dialect which was used for writing Beowulf was West Saxon dialect of English. So now let's quickly see the story of Beowulf. Beowulf was a epic poem. It was one of the longest surviving poems of the Anglo-Saxon period. We all know that. And Beowulf was a warrior in this, okay? And he was known as Valor. So these kings, they were hiring him to solve their problems. And Beowulf was a Geatish hero, which means he was from a land called Geats. So the land which Beowulf belongs to is actually Geats, and he's hired by various kings. So he goes there and solves their problems and comes, and he is now hired by a king called Hrothgar, and he is the king of dames. And he is hired to kill a demon called Grendel. Okay, Beowulf is a hero, and the villain here is Grendel now. And Beowulf kills Grendel in bare hands. Like, so he kills with his hands. Why does he do that? He didn't have a sword or what. So the thing is, Grendel cannot be killed by any sharp objects. Like no, nothing can pierce his body. So this Beowulf, he just tears apart Grendel with his own hands, and he showcases Grendel's hands to the public. So he's showcasing not the head, okay? He's just giving the public a sight of his arms in order to tell that he has killed Grendel. So, when Beowulf kills Grendel and puts his arms for the showcase of public, this angers, the sight of it angers Grendel's mother. And what she does in revenge, she goes and she kills Ascher, who is a loyal fighter of Beowulf. And the hero gets angry due to this. And what he does is like he sets up another mission to kill Grendel's mother now. So before going into the lake, like Grendel's mother was living under a lake. So before going to the lake, he's telling the king about what to do with his properties in case he's dead under the lake itself. And after giving all these lessons to the king about what to do, he'll get into this lake. And when he is jumping to the lake, and he goes into the lair of Grendel's mother, and he also like finds Grendel's body lying there. And he now kills Grendel's mother. He chops off her head and he takes it. And he is also taking Grendel's head now to the to show the public that he has killed both of them. So after killing Grendel and his mother, the king is very happy and he gives a lot of gifts to Beowulf. And this gift also includes a sword, which is a family property of the king. And now, after getting all these gifts, Beowulf returned to Geats, which is his own place. And eventually, after a period of time, he becomes the king of Geats. Now, the third war. The third fight of Beowulf is set in this epic poem, and it is with a dragon. Okay, a slave goes and takes a golden cup. He literally steals the golden cup from this dragon, and with this angers the dragon very much, and it is firing everything at the sight. And this angers the Jeet's king, which is Beowulf, like who is Beowulf, and he sets a fight with this dragon. And now, because he's aged, he's not able to fight this dragon out as easily as he did in the earlier periods. And like he sees his powers being unmatched with the dragon, and all these people who are fighting with Beowulf, who is helping Beowulf to fight with the dragon, I mean these warriors, they retreat back seeing Beowulf being unmatched to the powers of this dragon. And only one warrior stays with this Beowulf for the long run, and the name of the warrior is Wiglaf. So Beowulf is heavily injured during the fight with the dragon, and he eventually dies due to the wounds. And he is now ritually burned. Okay, he is burned in the Geatland and not buried. And the absence of Beowulf gives a lot of fear to the people of Geatland because it gives them a feeling of unprotectedness. And the whole poem of Beowulf is written in medias res, which means it starts at the middle of some happening. It starts with the funeral of a king called Shield Simpson, and it ends with the funeral of Beowulf. So the complete poem Beowulf starts with the funeral and ends with the funeral, and it is written in medias res. I mean, the starting of the poem starts from some happening in the middle. So it starts at the funeral of King Shield Simpson. So there were also other important works which were written during this Old English period. And a few of the works include Wetset, which is a long poem which has survived since the Anglo-Saxon period. And a collection of poems were also written during this period, a collection of poems, okay, anthology. So a collection of poems were written during this period and it is called Pearl, and it had 30 to 40,000 lines in it. And the whole poem was written in octosyllabic form. And Geoffrey of Monmouth has written a history of Britain during the period 1147, and the book is called Historia Regum Britannia. And now let's see the age of Chaucer in the next classes.